All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the secret architecture that powers pretty much every app you use. We're talking about design systems, and specifically, we're going to zero in on their two most basic building blocks, components and patterns.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a problem that, well, if you've ever worked on a product that's growing, this is going to feel painfully familiar. We're talking about design chaos. I mean, look at this quote from Figma. Even they admit their system got disjointed. It's like this inevitable growing pain, right? How on earth do you keep everything looking and feeling consistent when you're moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour?
In all that chaos, it leads to what designers call a fragmented user experience. You know that feeling, right? It's that weird, jarring sensation when you click from one screen to another in the same app, and it feels like it was built by two totally different teams. And that, right there, is the exact moment a design system stops being some nice-to-have luxury and becomes absolutely essential. Just think about it for a second. An app where every single button is a little bit different. Or maybe the same action has 3 different icons depending on where you are. I mean, come on. It's not just confusing for your users, it's a nightmare for the people building it. It just grinds development to a halt, and honestly, it slowly eats away at the trust people have in your product.
So how do we fight back against this chaos? Where do you even begin to bring some order to the madness? Well, you start small, like really small. We're talking about the most fundamental building block of any user interface.
And that building block is the component. Honestly, the absolute best way to think about components is to picture them as Legos. Yeah, just individual Lego bricks for your digital product. Each one is a simple, self-contained thing, a button, an icon, a text field, and the whole point is that you can reuse it over and over and over again to build stuff with perfect consistency.
Okay, and this is where the real magic happens. You've got your main component. Think of that as the master blueprint, the source of truth. Now, if you change something on that master, like its color or its shape, boom, every single instance, which is just a copy of it used somewhere in your designs, can update automatically. That's the superpower of a component-based system. It's efficiency on a massive scale. And here are a few of those Lego bricks you've probably seen 1,000 times. Every single one of these things, a button, a checkbox, an avatar, is a standardized, reusable component. You literally interact with these things countless times a day, probably without ever giving them a second thought.
All right, so we've got our individual bricks, our components. Great. But how do we actually put them together to build something that's, useful for a real person? Well, that's where our next big idea comes in, patterns.
Because let's be real, a single button just floating in space is pretty useless, right? Same for a text field. The real value, the real user experience, only starts to happen when we combine these little pieces into thoughtful, repeatable solutions that solve common problems.
So, if we stick with our Lego analogy, if components are the bricks, then patterns are the instruction manual. They're like these proven, reusable recipes that show you exactly how to combine your components to get something done. Think about a common goal, like logging into an account or searching for a product.
And here's the perfect example, a login form. That's a classic pattern. It's not one giant component, right? It's an assembly of several different ones. A couple of text inputs, maybe a checkbox, and a button. They're all arranged in a very specific, familiar way to do one thing and one thing only, get you signed in.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. We have our components, those are the bricks. We have our patterns, those are the blueprints. So how do these pieces actually scale up to create a whole cohesive system that can run an entire product?
Well, a really popular way to think about this whole process is a methodology called atomic design. It's just a super powerful way to visualize building interfaces. The idea is simple. You start with the tiniest possible parts and you build them up into bigger, more complex things. Kind of like how things work in the real world, right? And it really does work just like chemistry. You start with the simplest things, your atoms. We're talking an icon, a text label. Then you combine those atoms to make functional molecules, like a search bar, which is just an input field plus a button. And then you take those molecules and assemble them into bigger, more complex organisms, like a whole website header, with a logo, that search bar, and your main navigation.
Now, once you've got all these atoms and molecules and everything else, a really big practical question comes up. How in the world do you organize all this stuff? For a small team, hey, maybe one giant library works just fine. But as companies get bigger, you'll often see them split things up into separate, dedicated libraries. Like, you might have one for mobile and a totally different one for the web. It's all about keeping things manageable for everybody. So let's say you've done the hard work. You've built out all your components and patterns. Great. The next big hurdle, and it is a big one, is making sure your team actually uses the system and uses it effectively. So how do you pull that off?
It really all comes down to the little things, the details. I know stuff like consistent naming conventions or writing clear descriptions might sound boring, but trust me, that's the stuff that separates a good design system from a great one. These are the details that cut down on frustration and actually make the system a joy to use for both designers and developers.
And let's be clear, building a really solid system is a huge investment. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Just to put it in perspective for you, when Figma rebuilt their own internal system, they created over 680 design tokens. And that's just for stuff like colors and spacing. But that massive upfront effort, it pays off like you wouldn't believe in long-term speed and consistency.
At the end of the day, this quote here from Google's material design really just nails it. The goal is always a single unified system. And why is that so important? Because your users should never, ever feel like they're using a different product just because they switched from their phone to their laptop. The experience has to feel seamless, intuitive, and consistent, no matter where they are. And that really brings us to the final and maybe most important takeaway. A design system isn't just a folder full of assets. It's more than that. It's a shared language. It's that single source of truth that finally gets designers and engineers speaking the same language, on the same page. It empowers them to stop wasting time arguing about pixels and to start focusing on what really matters, building better, more consistent products and doing it faster.